I was hunting around the internet the other day and I ran across an old postcard from the 1940s. And what caught my attention was the name of the business on the postcard. It was, the name is John Paul Jones Motor Court, US 301, Halifax, North Carolina. Now this is not the actual postcard, but this is a print I printed off that looks very much like it would have looked. But what really drew my attention was the name, John Paul Jones. Why would you choose to name your motor court, motor lodge, John Paul Jones in the town of Halifax? Many prominent people lived in that area. So I don't know, I said maybe they were just honoring the Revolutionary War naval commander, or maybe there's more to it. So I got to digging, and what I found was a legend about John Paul Jones and his connection to the town of Halifax, and how that legend could very well be very important to the way the Revolutionary War turned out and how the Americans defeated the British at Yorktown. All of this could all play in to just a simple occurrence that happened many years ago in the town of Halifax with John Paul Jones. So let's get on the bike and take a trip to Halifax, and let's see if we can bring this legend to life. John Paul Jones was born in Scotland in 1747. His given name was John Paul. The Jones didn't come until many years later. We'll get into that. At 13, John Paul went to sea, and in his teen years he learned a great deal about sailing ships and navigation. The ship that John Paul was serving on when he was 19, the captain and the first mate became sick with yellow fever, and they both died. John Paul took over command of the ship and safely navigated back to harbor. The owner of the ship was very impressed with John Paul and put him in command of a ship. John Paul had just as many enemies as he had friends. I think his temper got him into trouble on many occasions. On one occasion, a group of men on his ship tried to mutiny against him. When they went to attack John Paul, he pulled a sword and killed their leader. This got him into trouble in the courts. But before he could stand trial, he escaped and made his way to America. And this is where we lose 2 years of John Paul's life. The history doesn't know exactly what happened or where he went. But the town of Halifax knows, and we'll get to that in a minute. But John Paul offered his services to the Continental Congress. They were just forming a new navy to go up against the British. And they knew they needed strong ships and seamen to take over command of those ships. John Paul Jones was the right man at the right time in the right place, and he was accepted into the Continental Navy. John Paul Jones's mission was to take as much merchandise from the British and to capture as many ships and crew as he possibly could during the Revolutionary War. And he did an excellent job of that. The British considered John Paul Jones nothing but a pirate and a criminal. And if they could have caught him, they would have hung him for sure. After much success on the seas, John Paul Jones was sent to France to take over a new ship that was being built there. It is during this time that John Paul Jones became good friends with Benjamin Franklin, who was an ambassador to France at the time. When John Paul Jones got his ship, he named it in honor of Benjamin Franklin, and he named it the Bonhomme Richard, which really is for Little Richard, in honor of Benjamin Franklin's Little Richard's Almanac. This ship had 42 cannons, and it was a beautiful ship for sure. John Paul set sail from France and started giving the British hail up and down the coast of England, making raids and capturing ships and vessels. The British wanted John Paul bad. In 1779, the British got their chance. The HMS Serapis spotted the Richard and John Paul's crew, and they set out an attack against them. The battle started in September after 7 o'clock, so it was at night. The two ships came across each other time after time, firing point blank. The HMS Serapis had 50 guns to John Paul's 42. They made pass after pass, firing directly broadside into each other. The battle lasted for over 3 hours. At one point, a British cannonball cut down the mast holding the American flag up, and the British thought that John Paul was getting ready to surrender. But when John Paul Jones heard that they wanted his surrender, he screamed out, "I have just begun to fight." And that phrase has become, down through history, one of the most popular sayings of military law. John Paul Jones ordered his ship to ram the Serapis. And when the ship rammed together, some of John Paul's crew jumped aboard with ropes and lashed the two ships together. And now it became a death grip, with the two ships fighting hand to hand with swords and pistols. It looked like the British may have the upper hand, but then all of a sudden, one of John Paul Jones's men dropped a hand grenade into the belly of the Serapis, and it set off a powder magazine that blew up in a fiery mass of boards and men. With this explosion, it turned the course of the battle, and soon the British commanders surrendered, giving the Americans a great victory at sea, proving that we could beat the English in battle. The Bonhomme Richard was so badly damaged during the battle that the ship could not be saved. John Paul Jones ordered all his men onto the Serapis, and he took command of the Serapis as the Richard sank into the sea. Because of this battle and many more like it, the United States, with the French help, gained their independence from England. Today, the body of John Paul Jones rests in a sarcophagus in Annapolis, Maryland, at the Naval Academy, and it's guarded round the clock. You might say he's important. So now you know who John Paul Jones was. Let's see if we can connect him with the town of Halifax. I'm at the historic marker for Willie Jones in Halifax. It looks like it's spelled Willie, but it's actually pronounced Wiley. And it describes how he was born in 1741 and lived until 1801. And his home, he had a huge mansion and plantation very close here. They describe it as thousands of acres, so he had a humongous plantation here. But I'm not here to talk about Willie Jones. I'm here to talk about John Paul Jones and how he became John Paul Jones. His birth name was John Paul, and if you remember the story, he got in trouble and came to America, and it is described, the legend that comes through the town of Halifax is that John Paul, being a fugitive, was making his way across the Americas, keeping a low key, and wound up in Halifax and made the acquaintance of Willie Jones, and they soon became friends, and Mr. Jones took him into his home, and for 2 years John Paul stayed here with Willie Jones. It was during this time that he was here at Halifax that he got the spark of freedom and decided that he wanted to fight for the Americas. And with the help of Willie Jones, he was able to join the Continental Navy that they were just beginning to form. And it's also because of this relationship and friendship that John Paul had with Willie Jones, he took on the name of Jones. And that is where the name John Paul Jones came from Willie Jones' friendship with him. And now you know the legend. All right, we're here in Halifax at the museum, at the historic Halifax Museum. And we're going to go inside and see maybe we can get some information about John Paul Jones in here, see what they know about him. All right, we're in the historic Halifax Museum in the town of Halifax. And as you walk in the door, in the corner, you see a bust of John Paul Jones. And it's got a little information on it. It says there's a strong North Carolina tradition that claims that Revolutionary War naval hero John Paul Jones took his surname from Halifax County's prominent politician Willie Jones. It looks like it's spelled Willie, but they say it's pronounced Wiley. The story alleges that Jones found John Paul broke, friendless, on the streets of Halifax in 1773. Jones made John Paul a permanent guest in his home and helped get a naval commission. They're saying that Willie Jones actually helped get him into the Navy by promoting him to the Continental Congress. And in gratitude for all of this, that he took the surname of Jones. And that is how he became John Paul Jones. The Scotsman adopted the friend's surname. And I hope you guys will come to Halifax and tour the museum here. They've got a lot of great things to check out here. And now you know the legend that connects Halifax with John Paul Jones. The reason it's only considered a legend is because we have no physical proof that John Paul Jones stayed at Halifax. But this legend goes back over 200 years and has a lot of credibility to it and fits perfectly into the 2-year time frame where we don't know where John Paul was or what he was up to. So is it true? I think it is, but I'll let you decide. And if you get a chance, stop by Historic Halifax, check them out. And as always, thank you for watching.